Take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the continent to bring you the truth about cannabis and marijuana law reform.
I smoke pot and I like it a lot.
CannabisRadio.com presents The Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation.
Hey, this is great, man.
Now, here's your host, Radical Russ Belville.
Good day, tokers and tokettes and non-toking lovers of liberty. It is Monday, August 1st, 2016, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. Wow, can you believe we've made it to August already? Last third of the year getting all lined up for us, getting ready for that election that's coming up in November. Really excited about our Cannabis Radio Marijuana Election Night coverage that's coming up on Tuesday, November 8th. It's going to be huge, folks. Or as Donald Trump would say, it's going to be huge. We've got coverage, live coverage from California, Arizona, Nevada, Massachusetts, and Maine. We will have someone on the line from all 5 of the states at the campaign headquarters giving us the latest numbers as the polls come in on election night for those 5 states' attempt to legalize marijuana. We'll also have reporters in Florida and Arkansas on their attempts to legalize medical marijuana. Missouri, which we're crossing our fingers should make the ballot. We'll have someone there as well. In Montana, there's 2 initiatives where they've got a reform of their medical marijuana to put it back the way it used to be in the good old days, and a repeal of medical marijuana, actually a return to absolute prohibition in Montana. 2 things going down in Montana. Then we've got in North Dakota the possibility of a medical marijuana initiative. So we'll cover all of that. 10 possible states we'll be covering, and a U.S. territory we might be covering. We'll tell you a little bit about that in the Cannabis Radio News, and I'll be honest, I don't think I'm going to get myself a reporter out there. That's a long ways away, and I don't know anybody, but we'll see what we can do. We've got all sorts of great stuff on today's show. As you know, it's Monday, and every Monday we get our chance to visit with Dr. Mitch Earlywine, one of the leading researchers on cannabis science, history, culture, and health, in our Cannabis Q&A with Dr. Mitch. You can get your questions in via our chat room right here on CannabisRadio.com. We've got all sorts of great studies and surveys to look at. We'll have Dr. Mitch give us all the latest news and take your questions through our chat room. At the end of the show, we'll have time for a radical rant that I am calling Hillary Clinton is the I-502 of presidential candidates. That's right, folks. We're going to talk about politics here on the Russ Belville Show. I know it upsets some of you. I know you get I get these comments on my Facebook. They say, just stick to talking about marijuana. No, I will not. I'm a fully formed human being, and while marijuana is my primary interest, I have secondary interests too. And when those secondary interests are going to affect my primary interest, as the presidential election will greatly affect what happens with marijuana, I think it's important for us to dig into that. So we're going to talk a little bit about it, how Hillary is the I-502 of presidential candidates. Also coming up on the show today, we're going to have our Government at Work segment, and we're going to talk about the Philippine Trump. I don't know if you've been following a lot of this international news coming out of the Philippines about their new president, Rodrigo Duterte, but this man gives us a very scary look, a little bit of a foreshadowing of how bad things could get if the wrong guy gets elected president. So we'll take a look at that in our Government at Work. Also, we'll have a Behind the Headlines segment. The Drug Enforcement Administration is trying to convince the American people that marijuana grows are the new meth labs. Yeah, we're going to unpack that one. And that all comes right after our Cannabis Radio News. In the headlines, we'll tell you about that U.S. territory possibly voting on legalization. We've got pain patients getting some respect and love in Minnesota. We've got more synthetic pot overdoses, this time in Pennsylvania. We got a mayor in Massachusetts endorsing legalization. Project Sam has announced some fundraising for anti-legalization efforts, and some municipal news from Maine.
This is the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
Cannabis use isn't the only thing growing, so are we. Grow with us. CannabisRadio.com.
Thousands of cannabis professionals convene this August in Portland, Oregon, to the city responsible for $500 million in cannabis commerce. The Portland Expo Center hosts Indo Expo, August 6th and 7th. Indo Expo has seed to sale covered all weekend long, with educational seminars and over 250 exhibitors. Lights, nutrients, trimmers, extractors, greenhouses, cutting-edge grow gear, genetics, smoking accessories, and more. Free admission for buyers, store owners, and MJ industry professionals. Visit www.indoexpo.com.
The Tommy Chong Show on Cannabis Radio. You got me running, you got me hiding. Run, hide, and hide, run any way you want, let it roll. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You got me doing what you want me, babe. Girl, what you want me to do. Shut up and do a podcast, as I want you to do. Oh, that sounds like a good idea.
The Tommy Chong Podcast, only on CannabisRadio.com.
The Russ Belville Show. We're as much like Cheech and Chong as ordinary Americans are like the Three Stooges. Hey, Mo!
The Russ Belville Show is proudly sponsored by the Marijuana Business Association. The MJBA, called by NBC News the Cannabis Chamber of Commerce, is the fastest growing business association in the fastest growing industry in America. I've been working with the MJBA for years, and I personally invite you to join the MJBA. MJBA also publishes the popular MJ Headline News on Facebook and the MJNewsNetwork.com, and Marijuana Channel 1 on YouTube. Visit mjba.net for more details.
It's time for the Cannabis Radio News, covering the latest headlines in consumer cannabis, medical marijuana, and industrial hemp. Cannabis Radio News is now available exclusively at CannabisRadio.com. Now your marijuana headlines in 4 minutes and 20 seconds. This is Cannabis Radio News.
This is your Cannabis Radio News for Monday, August 1st, 2016. Saipan, Northern Mariana Islands. American voters are deciding on marijuana legalization in California, Arizona, Nevada, Massachusetts, and Maine this election. We may also get the chance to pass legalization in the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands, a U.S. territory just southeast of Japan. Senator Sixto K. Igisomar pre-filed a bill that would legalize medical and recreational marijuana in one fell swoop, becoming the first U.S. jurisdiction to do so. Nearby Guam, another U.S. territory, legalized medical marijuana in 2014, but the Mariana Islands remain under complete prohibition of cannabis. If the Election Commission approves the bill by next Wednesday, voters there will decide in November 2016. If the bill is approved after next Wednesday, the vote wouldn't come until the November 2018 election. Minneapolis, Minnesota. Today, pain patients in the state of Minnesota are now legally able to acquire medical marijuana products at dispensaries. The state's medical marijuana program was begun in 2014, but it took a year before legislators added chronic pain as a qualifying condition, and that law goes into effect today. Over 500 pain patients have already registered in July, the first month they could join the program. Patients may acquire their medicine at 8 dispensaries located throughout the state. However, Minnesota law does not allow patients to use the herbal form of cannabis. Only non-smokable oils, tinctures, and edible preparations of cannabis are available. Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Following a high-profile overdose case that sickened 33 people in Brooklyn, authorities in Pennsylvania are blaming synthetic pot for overdoses that have sickened 20 people in Harrisburg. Dauphin County District Attorney Ed Marsico states that a synthetic, branded as Darkness, has sent its users to the emergency room with symptoms like advanced delirium, including one patient who had to be housed in intensive care. Synthetic cannabinoid use is up across the country since it is cheap, widely available, and doesn't cause a positive result on workplace and probation drug tests. Pennsylvania's new medical marijuana program doesn't allow patients to use herbal medications, and penalties for herbal marijuana possession still include jail time and a criminal record everywhere but Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. Holyoke, Massachusetts. The mayor of Holyoke has become the first mayor in Massachusetts to endorse the initiative legalizing marijuana that appears on the November ballot. Mayor Alex Morse said in a statement that, quote, "I could no longer tolerate a system that results in disproportionate arrests of African Americans and other minority groups, and, frankly, has failed for decades to limit the availability of marijuana," end quote. Mayor Morse is opposed by the Commonwealth's governor, Charlie Baker, its Speaker of the House, Robert DeLeo, its Attorney General, Maura Healey, and the Mayor of Boston, Martin Walsh. All those politicians but the governor are Democrats. Morse's support is in step with his demographic. At age 22, Morse was elected as mayor and has now served 3 terms of 2 years each, and millennials like Morse overwhelmingly support legalization. Healy and Walsh are in their mid-40s, and DeLeo and Baker are in their early 60s. Alexandria, Virginia. SAM Action, the nonprofit 501c4 affiliate of Project SAM, Smart Approaches to Marijuana, co-founded by a former Obama administration drug policy advisor, Kevin Sabet, announced today a fundraising milestone of more than $2 million dedicated to defeating marijuana legalization and medical marijuana measures on the ballot in 7 states. The multi-million-dollar commitment represents the single largest fundraising amount ever dedicated to fighting the legalization of non-medical marijuana via ballot initiative. Project SAM claims that none of the $2 million was donated by corporations, corporate interest groups, or people acting on their behalf. Saco, Maine. Officials in Saco are considering a proposal that would amend zoning ordinances to prohibit medical marijuana caregivers from growing the drug inside their homes. City Administrator Kevin Sutherland tells the Portland Press-Herald that the City Council enacted a moratorium on medical marijuana facilities to determine where such businesses should operate. Sutherland says zoning officials recognized it would be a public safety concern to allow in-home growing operations. This has been your Cannabis Radio News for Monday, August 1st, 2016. I'm Russ Belville.
We don't limit how much you smoke, and we don't limit where you listen. Cannabis Radio is now on iTunes, Stitcher, and iHeartRadio.
While the feds and state are doing their dance, you still need to transact business and manage your cash. Go professional and let your customers pay with PayQuick. They pay you and they earn rewards points. PayQuick connects to your bank account for free and secures all of your transactions. And with PayQuick, you can pay your producers and processors for free. Plus, it pays to have it because it makes depositing your cash safe and so easy. No cops, no crooks, just compliance and comfort, knowing you have your cannabis business in check with PayQuick. PayQuick, the safe and easy way to pay. PayQuick.com.
Georgia.
Hi, this is Willie Nelson. Alcohol prohibition didn't work in the 1920s, and marijuana prohibition isn't working today. It's time we stopped arresting responsible marijuana smokers. It's the fair thing to do.
For more information, contact NORML, the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. Call toll-free 888-67-NORML or visit their website at norml.org.
The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at radicalruss.com.
Are you playing an acoustic guitar but want to be louder without an amp? Try a resonator guitar. The fingerboard extension has National Resophonic and other resonators, square necks and round necks. Stop by the Fingerboard Extension downtown Corvallis at 120 Northwest 2nd Street today, or check out its inventory on the web at fingerboardextension.com. Go wild hog in the woods.
The world of cannabis is evolving at a frenetic pace. The Russ Belville Show gets behind the headlines to take a deeper look at breaking news in our Cannabis Focus.
Today in the Cannabis Focus, we take a look at an incredibly stupid statement from the Drug Enforcement Administration. I know, I should probably narrow it down a little bit. This latest story is that marijuana grows are the new meth houses, according to the DEA. They say that meth labs, contaminate houses, lead to spontaneous combustion, and so forth. But now the new meth lab is the marijuana grow. And according to the report released by the DEA in June, they say the proliferation of growing operations in Colorado has led to property damage and interstate marijuana trafficking. They point to people retrofitting houses by punching holes in walls, jury-rigging electrical systems, condensation caused by growing can lead to mold, use of flammable materials is hazardous to first responders, and so forth. The DEA concludes, quote, marijuana grows often cause extensive damage to the houses where they are maintained. Much like the meth houses of the 1990s, many of these homes may ultimately be rendered uninhabitable. All right, well, let's take a deeper look at that, first of all. A meth house, a place where they are cooking up meth, is using chemicals that in and of themselves are combustible, harmful, dangerous, and poisonous. The process being used in and of itself, even if you do it perfectly, is dangerous. A grow house, on the other hand, can be dangerous if you do it wrong. If you wire it up badly, yeah. If you're careless with your chemicals, yeah. But the actual process of growing marijuana plants, done correctly, has no harm to the environment, to the neighbors, or to the home where it's being done. Now, I am not saying that there are some of these grow operations, illegal grow operations, where they buy a suburban house and they don't even live there. They just completely pack the house with lights and they steal water and they steal electricity and there's too much humidity and mold comes along. And so, yeah, I'm not denying that can happen. But the question, DEA, is to ask yourself, why is that happening? How come nobody ever buys a suburban house, outfits it with a shit ton of grow lights to grow tobacco? Why does that not happen? It's not that people don't like cigarettes. A whole lot of smokers still out there, even though it's gone way down. Why is it that nobody retrofits a house and installs a whole bunch of high-powered grow lights to grow wine grapes and to produce wine from those, some alcohol? It's not that people don't like alcohol. Plenty of people like alcohol out there. But it seems somehow, DEA, that nobody has the incentive to retrofit a residential home for the growing of wine grapes or tobacco. Because there's no profit in it. There is zero profit in it, folks. Because wine and tobacco are legal, and if you want to grow them for profit, you can get a license, you can get a farm, and you can get a brewery, whatever you want to do, and you can do this legally. And it's done at such volume that the prices are low enough that it's almost impossible for someone to undercut it. Happens a little bit with cigarettes, especially in places where they way overtax cigarettes. But for the most part, doesn't happen. And certainly, even though the cigarettes have an underground market in the retailing of them, there is no underground market in the production of them. There's nobody converting tobacco grow houses. So DEA, if you are really concerned that marijuana grow houses, the illegal marijuana grows that are stealing the electricity, stealing the water, ruining the homes, are such a big danger, you ought to do some research on what method is the only method that is proven to reduce the demand for such illegal grows. The answer is staring you right in the face. 4 states and Washington, D.C. have already done it. 5 more are proposing it. Now, the answer might be, well, we still find illegal grow houses in Colorado and in Oregon. Yeah, because there's money to be made in growing it and shipping it to Kansas and Illinois and Massachusetts and all sorts of places. Legalization has to continue, and it has to happen on a national scale. And eventually you will find all the illegal grow houses go away. It's so simple.
One major responsibility is to encourage people to use less drugs.
All right, folks, it's 20 after 4:20 in Denver, Colorado. Thanks for the advice, President Bush. I got to say, one silver lining of the 2016 election so far is my opinion of former President Bush in comparison to Donald Trump has risen greatly. We'll be right back.
Maui Wowie, Acapulco Gold, California Kush. Our strains stretch everywhere too. This is the Cannabis Radio Network.
Oh, lady marijuana, let me tell you something now. But a game for your phone gonna make you say, wow. The game's about the game of growing cannabis for cash. Grow the seed till they bud, put the savings in the stash. Little by little, your empire grows large. Put the big celebrities inside your entourage. You can choose to play with Snoop or me or Cheech and Chong. Cypress Hill, Willie Nelson, Wiz Khalifa with a bong. The name of the game is Hemp Inc., that's the point. Download and play while you light yourself a joint. The business of cannabis should be no crime. Hemp Inc. is even hot-proofed by the man who run High Times. Oh yeah? Get it on Android and iOS today. Marijuana llama out. Got to tend to me own crops, you know. Money don't make itself. Hemp Inc.
Growing green to generate more green. Talking with multi-cup award winner Maya Elizabeth. The Grow Show with Kyle Kushman. I've always followed Whoopi, and I think she's fantastic. I've followed her advocacy over the years. Tell me a little bit how you think partnering with a mainstream high-profile figure actually benefits the cannabis community as a whole.
I have infinite respect for Whoopi Goldberg. I wouldn't just partner with any into that kind of thing. I'm into cannabis medicine, and I'm into making quality products that people can find relief from. So to hear that her vision was actually the same, it's been beyond a dream to manifest.
The Grow Show with Kyle Kushman, only on CannabisRadio.com.
You're not high. You're listening to the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
The Supreme Court is wrong on the Second Amendment.
Okay, maybe you're high, too.
Coming soon to a city near you, Cannabis Finance Boot Camp. Get all your cannabis accounting, legal, and compliance questions answered by their knowledgeable panel of industry experts who want to help your cannabis business boom. Whether you're a grower, dispensary operator, or a newcomer to the field, your cannabis business needs Cannabis Finance Boot Camp. For information on upcoming events, visit CannabisFinanceBootCamp.com.
Reforming America's marijuana prohibition laws takes education, lobbying, and voting. From Washington, D.C. to your state capital to your city hall, marijuana law reform involves all levels of civic life. Learn how you can make your impact with elected officials as we take a look at our government at work. Today at Government at Work, I want to take a look across the ocean to the nation of the Philippines and their new president, Rodrigo Duterte. And this ought to scare anyone who is a student of history and who recognizes a rise in right-wing type fascistic, nationalistic violence. This Duterte guy, when he was running for president there in the Philippines, had all sorts of kind of red flags that should have set some people off. For one, there was a case, a famous case in the Philippines, and it involved a high-profile rape that went down. It was a kidnapping, and they were holding hostages, and there was like 16 people held hostages, and there was a bunch of the women that were hostages that were raped, and it's a big, long story, but basically the controversy is when Duterte, a presidential candidate, was asked about this, his quote was I mad because she was raped? Yes, that's one of the reasons. But she really was beautiful. The mayor should have been first. End quote. So you got a guy here, presidential candidate, joking about rape. Basically showing that he has little respect for women. There's also a case where Duterte made a joke about his friend who is physically disabled and a senior citizen, making fun of disabled people, huh? And Duterte implied that because of the disability, his friend should just commit suicide. Kind of a joke there. Joking, you're crippled, you should just kill yourself. Does that sound familiar? Presidential candidate makes fun of the disabled. Interesting. He was divorced, or he was annulled. He had a wife, Elizabeth Zimmerman. They got an annulment. In the papers on that annulment, as there was, psychological evaluations going on, the allegation is that Duterte was diagnosed with narcissistic and antisocial personality disorder. A former wife who points out her ex-husband was a narcissist and antisocial. He also engaged in violent behavior and much womanizing. That was the allegation for why there was an annulment. He was violent to women and he was a womanizer. Gee, does that ring any bells to anybody thinking about the elections? There's also rumor and some evidence that Duterte might be involved with the Communist Party of the Philippines and the militant wing of that party known as the New People's Army. So this presidential candidate somehow had strong ties with communists and militants. People like Vladimir Putin, right? Does that sound familiar at all? There's also reports that Duterte, who is a multimillionaire, by the way, was shielding and hiding his assets and liabilities, as are supposed to be in the Philippines, legally mandated that you disclose. Like how presidents here disclose their tax returns so people know where their finances are and who they owe favors to and such. Duterte had that problem too. Doesn't that sound interesting? And then Duterte says that if the Congress tries to impeach him, now this is while he was running, folks, while he was running for president, Duterte said he would close the Congress if it tries to impeach him. He would shut down the Congress. Now, the biggest controversy of Duterte is that this guy now, this President Duterte, has called for, he's a law and order, tough on crime guy. Law and order, tough on crime guy. And he has called for, while he was running, he pledged to kill 100,000 criminals in the first 6 months of his term. Promised to kill 100,000 criminals. He says he'll dump the bodies in Manila Bay, and there'll be so many bodies in the bay that the fish will grow fat. And in the past, when it was alleged that he was a part of killing 700 people, he replied no to the New York Times. It wasn't 700, it was 1,700 people to the New York Times. And he has suggested killing criminals to address the crime problem. He said, quote, "It is going to be bloody. I will use the military and the police to go out and arrest them, hunt them. And if they will offer a violent resistance, and thereby placing the lives of law enforcers and the military whom I would task for a job to do, I will simply say, kill them all and end the problem." And more specifically, President Duterte has called on the execution of drug abusers and drug pushers, drug traffickers. Duterte has called on the police and the federal forces to just kill them, just shoot them and kill them. He has promised that he will pardon anybody that gets brought up on charges on such a thing, and that he will pardon himself if brought up on war crimes or any sort of human rights abuses for doing such a thing. Already, 200 to 300 people have been just shot down, killed in the Philippines. And they think that's an undercount because that's only the count of who the cops and the feds have killed. There are all sorts of these vigilante groups out there that Duterte has also encouraged to just go out and kill drug users and drug dealers. And they have killed dozens, hundreds of people as well. It's gotten so bad that 60,000 drug users and drug traffickers have turned themselves into the authorities rather than face being executed in the streets. So when people are telling you to be afraid of a Donald Trump presidency,
this is the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
How high do you like your profit margin? CannabisRadio.com. Cash?
Sorry.
I don't carry around cash, and I don't want to use the ATM and pay surcharges.
You don't need to carry cash. Haven't you heard about PayQuick?
Okay, tell me about PayQuick.
It's the safe and easy way to pay. It works just like your debit card to securely pay for your purchase, and it gives you rewards points every time you use it.
Nice.
PayQuick, the safe and easy way to pay. PayQuick.com.
The political climate is at a fever pitch, and the fight for the social fabric of America is set for battle this November. Tuesday, November 8th, the cannabis liberation movement takes a huge step forward, and Cannabis Radio is here to chronicle this legendary moment. CannabisRadio.com and the Cannabis Radio News team will feature wall-to-wall live coverage of all the coast-to-coast voting of state amendments, ballots, propositions, and initiatives that will further progress the cannabis crusade. Join us Thursday, November 8th for Vote 2016, The Path to Cannabis Freedom, only on CannabisRadio.com.
You're listening to Radical Russ on the Russ Belville Show.
When you are starting up a medical cannabis business, you want a fired-up lawyer who understands the needs of cannabis consumers. The law office of Lauren Vasquez is your fired-up lawyer for the cannabis industry. Visit her website, fireduplawyer.com, or call 1-855-MMJ-LAWS for more information. That's 855-665-5297 for Lauren Vasquez, your fired-up lawyer, or email fireduplawyer@gmail.com.
It's time for the Russ Belville Show's Cannabis Q&A with Dr. Mitch Earlywine. Dr. Earlywine is a professor of psychology at the State University of New York at Albany and a leading author and researcher on cannabinoids and health, who pins the Ask Dr. Mitch column for High Times Magazine. Get your questions ready in our live chat or call in to 971-533-7111 now.
Welcome back, everybody. Time for our Cannabis Q&A with Dr. Mitch Earlywine. How you doing, Dr. Mitch?
Having a delightful summer.
Me too. I can't believe it's August already.
Kind of heartbreaking for those of us in academia.
Oh, that's right. You got to get back. What classes are you teaching come fall semester?
I'm actually taking a leave this fall to explore more clinical work. So if you need a therapist in the Albany area who's not going to pathologize your cannabis, call Health Psychology Associates and ask for me.
Oh, please do. That's something a lot of us, we ought to consider is, people looking for mental health help that are cannabis consumers often run into clinicians that will just want to drop you right in that drug seeker bucket. What's it going to take to get some change that way, some more cannabis-friendly therapists?
Well, in fact, I've been trying to do this in the training here with our grad students and emphasizing negative consequences, not frequency of use. And it's at least sinking in on sort of the next generation of folks. But I'm noticing even in my practice, people are afraid that they're going to get sued, which I find just so comic, as if some cannabis user is going to run out and start giving hand jobs to raise money for a habit or something. It just makes no sense to me. So I'm eager to keep spreading the word as best I can.
Well, I got plenty of cannabis if anyone's out there. All right, let's go to our studies. And if you got questions, we're watching the chat room as well, and we'll get your question into Dr. Mitch. But the first study I wanted to talk about, or I guess it's more findings having to do with the early cannabis trade routes across the Silk Road, and the news being that there's been weed dealers for 5,000 years.
I just love this, and I really love the way they, go back and actually find the evidence. It looks like certainly industrial hemp is going back this far, and maybe some might dare to say, even back 8,000 years. But then the pollen and the pressed resin and things like that, I mean, come on, that had to be used medicinally. So I love the thought that basically our current dispensary owners are part of a potentially 8,000-year tradition.
That's an amazing thing. 5,000-year-old dealers. They would have been 4,000-year-old dealers, but dealers, they're always late. It takes. All right. The study that's going around, I'm so glad I got you on to talk about this one, because this is hitting CBS News, ABC News, the big mainstream media. A study on secondhand marijuana smoke saying that it's deadlier than conventional tobacco secondhand smoke due to the way rats' blood vessels reacted. What can you tell us about this?
This is kind of upsetting that they're willing to jump this far based on rodent data, whereas if we'd found out marijuana was less deadly, this probably wouldn't have even been published. So they've got these poor rats in a really overdone secondhand smoke situation where, I mean, it sounds like they're lucky they can see into the cage. And yeah, the recovery time on that sort of how their veins are essentially reacting and staying pliable is markedly longer than it is with secondhand tobacco smoke. But this is a far cry from anything involving humans or human cardiovascular health. And we've got large epidemiological studies suggesting that this is not really an issue in humans. And so, yeah, definitely, don't hop on the exercise bike right after you've been sitting in a hot box, but otherwise there's really more smoke than fire here.
I was concerned about this because we've talked so many times about how firsthand cannabis smoke is so less harmful than the firsthand tobacco smoke, and it kind of vexes me to think, how could firsthand be safer but secondhand be more dangerous?
Oh, well, so it's actually on different measures. So this is artery and blood vessel flexibility performance, sort of how flexible do your blood vessels stay, and that one looks like cannabis is in second place. But as far as just overall safety, it's way better than tobacco smoke from a respiratory irritation situation and for carcinogens. So this is just a different dependent measure, so to speak. And yeah, what a surprise. Cannabis smoke isn't the greatest on something like this, but I feel like this is getting way overblown.
Yeah, and from a methodological standpoint, the thing that jumped out at me was a line that said something to the effect of, we exposed the rats to the same volume of secondhand cannabis smoke that you might experience in secondhand tobacco smoke. And I'm thinking, what room is there that has as much cannabis smoke in it, other than maybe Snoop Dogg's, den, has as much cannabis smoke as a typical smoky tobacco room?
Well, somebody who's got a whole lot more money for cannabis than I do.
Yeah, I guess so. All right, let's go to this next study, a federal study that says medical marijuana laws calm cannabis fears. And I think they're referring to perception of risk. What does this tell us?
So this is intriguing, but a little circular. So what a surprise. States that have passed medical marijuana laws have people living in them who are actually pretty realistic in my mind, or at least less alarmist about cannabis's potential harm. Now, of course, it may have been that way before the medical marijuana law was passed. That's why the medical marijuana law got passed. But I sort of love the idea that, in fact, as folks get familiar with cannabis by living in a medical marijuana state, they realize the sky really isn't falling, and that the plant is more of a plus than a minus.
All right. Well, I'm always skeptical of any study that talks about the perception of risk, when for so long the propaganda has said, it's going to cause us to grow man boobs, destroy our chromosome. Well, of course we perceive it as less risky now that we've got the truth.
Exactly.
All right, let's get to this study. This is actually just a note of some research that's going to go on in New Zealand. $157,000 being promoted for the study of cannabinoids' effect on brain cancer. What do we know so far about brain cancers and cannabis?
So we've had some pretty compelling data suggesting at least some tumor shrinkage in response to cannabinoids, and generalizing all the way up to primates. So it really seems like this is a compelling potential use for the plant. And I mean, $157,000 is not a lot as big grants go, but they've got the chance to, basically see if cannabinoids can kill some of these tumor cells in a very controlled condition. And I'm super eager to see these results, and incredibly optimistic that we're going to find that cannabis may never become your standard cancer therapy, but it would certainly be a nice adjunct to it.
When I see a dollar figure like $157,000, it doesn't sound like much, although it might be more in New Zealand. I don't know. But is there any comparable brain cancer research going on in the U.S.?
Alas, not a thing. I mean, not even close. So that's pretty telling.
And is of any other countries? Israel, perhaps.
Israel has not been focusing on the brain cancer part per se, and in part I feel like as their citizens want, they're going ahead and going with the things where we already have the data and doing much larger sample things. So the PTSD work and the cancer-related chemotherapy, so not as a treatment for cancer so much as an approach to making other cancer treatments more palatable.
We've got another story coming up about the use of cannabis in the treatment of sports injuries. We've spoken about the Gridiron Cannabis Coalition. They're the ones that are examining this. And what do you think about the possibilities of this, both from the clinical standpoint, could it actually help, and from the political standpoint, will it be able to get past these sports leagues?
I mean, it's so harsh to think about this. I was just watching that show with the Arizona Cardinals on Amazon, and how these guys are just getting their heads bashed in, week after week after week. And we already have markedly more data than a lot of drugs had to support preventive use, that if they just had some cannabis right there on the sidelines, if they take a knock to the noggin there, it would really, really help a lot. And the downside is incredibly slim. I sound like a total space case when I say this, but I think they would respond better if they'd actually had a chance to habituate to low doses of cannabis throughout the season. So if they did have to take a quick hit off the vaporizer after taking a big spill, it wouldn't impair them very much. But now it sounds like I'm actually saying, hey, maybe people ought to have a little tincture every night while they're playing in the NFL. And that's, unfortunately, I think, the best solution to all this.
It's a shame. We've got something like 20 of the NFL teams play in states that have medical marijuana. And if Missouri and Florida pass their medical marijuana initiatives this year, there'll be 24 of the 32 teams, 2/3 of the teams. Or is that 3/4? Math. A lot of the teams will be in states where medical marijuana is legal. The sports leagues are just, the commissioners here are just so far behind the curve. It almost seems like they're even farther behind than the politicians are. Why? Why are these sports leaders and government leaders so far behind the public sentiment?
So this is so sad, but there's that perception that athletes are role models in a way that's just completely inappropriate. And in fact, any of these guys could, have 90 kegs delivered to their houses at any time, and nobody would bat an eye. So why would it actually be such a big deal for something that can actually be helpful? And I think they're all just quaking in their boots about federal legal status. And it just makes me kind of sad that it's really the result of a lack of education.
All right. And our final story here has to do with some controversy over some research that went on in Vermont with respect to marijuana. What's the story on this one?
I mean, the bottom line here is anytime you ask somebody to do a big review of all the cannabis research literature, it's either going to end up being 325 pages long, or it's going to end up being focused on some key issues and potentially biased. And I'm afraid that's pretty much what happened here, so that when they asked folks to go ahead and review this literature, they got the bad news, they got the alarmist statistics, they got less than up-to-date evidence based on studies that have subsequently not replicated. And of course, then it made it look like there's no need for the state to change their laws.
All right. So we'll keep our eye on that and see what happens. And, of course, we'll be back next Monday with more on our Cannabis Q&A segment with Dr. Mitch Earlywine. If you'd like to get your questions handled privately, you can always send them by email. The address is 420research@gmail.com, 420research@gmail.com. And no classes from Dr. Mitch this fall, but if you're looking for a cannabis-friendly therapist in the Albany, New York area, well, send him that email at 420research@gmail.com. Thanks, Dr. Mitch, and we'll see you next week.
Looking forward to it.
All right, stay tuned, folks. We'll be back with the Radical Rant on why Hillary Clinton is the I-502 of presidential candidates.
This is the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
Seed to sale, clicks to conversions, and more. You're listening to the Cannabis Radio Network.
The next generation of vaporizers has arrived. Vuber vaporizers are blazing the way with unparalleled technology for oil, concentrate, or dry flower pens. Providing unsurpassed customer service and expert craftsmanship, Vuber vaporizers use cutting-edge technology, providing a power-packed, smoother vapor with a lifetime guarantee. Experience vaporizing the way it was meant to be. The Vuber way.
Previously on the Stoner Jesus Show.
We do have John McAfee. He's running for the Libertarian Party nomination for president. What makes someone like you want to take the reins of this?
We're so far behind, it's frightening. And in a cyber war, we can't hack into the Chinese. Back in 1979, they started building cyber defense systems. We didn't even think about it until 20 years ago. I see no candidates and certainly no one within government capable of dealing with this issue.
The Stoner Jesus Show, live Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Or find the Stoner Jesus Show podcast on demand at CannabisRadio.com and StonerJesus.net.
Peace, bitches.
You're not high. You're listening to the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
Each year on my birthday, every American gets a cupcake.
Okay. Maybe you're high, too.
Don't want to spend money on a night out, but don't know what to do other than watching TV or playing video games? Consider playing guitar, bass, banjo, or mandolin. The instrument will give you hours of entertainment with friends with minimal expense. Stop by the Fingerboard Extension downtown Corvallis at 120 Northwest 2nd Street today, or check out its inventory on the web at fingerboardextension.com.
We must wage what I have called total war against public enemy number one.
I support a change in law to end federal criminal penalties for possession of up to 1 ounce of marijuana.
That marijuana, pot, grass, whatever you want to call it, is probably the most dangerous drug.
Some think there won't be room for them in jail. We'll make room.
I experimented with marijuana a time or two, and I didn't like it and didn't inhale.
One major responsibility is to encourage people to use less drugs.
Entirely legitimate topic for debate.
Radical Rant.
Well, today in the Radical Rant, I want to talk about I-502. I-502, of course, was Washington State's marijuana legalization initiative. And it's the one that had 5 nanogram per se DUID attached to it. And it has no home grow. 2 provisions that still exist to this day, 4 years later. and have further evolved through the passage of SB 5052 in a very, awful state legislature, has evolved to a situation that has reduced seriously the medical marijuana allowances for patients and the accessibility for patients. So the reason I wanted to bring up I-502 is I want to put this in the context of the 2016 presidential election and talk to you a little bit about how I come to these decisions, how I think the way I think. Because really, if you want to put a fine point on it, I get paid to think. I wake up and I read stuff and I think about it and I watch and I research and I analyze and I calculate and I think about things and then I say them on this show or I write them down for some article. But at the heart of it, my job is thinking. That's all I do is think about shit and smoke weed while I'm doing it. So when it came to I-502, when I-502 came up, understand the context. We had just lost Prop 19, 46% 2 years prior. 2011, there is a group called Sensible Washington that's pushing a really good legalization initiative. Really good stuff. Would have been one of the best one in the country probably had it passed. And then there was the group that was pushing, New Approach Washington was pushing I-502, far more restrictive and containing some pretty odious provisions in a per se DUID and no home grow. And when I-502 first came out, let me let you in on a little secret. When it first came out, I was no on I-502. I have this graphic, it's probably still floating around the internet, that I created that made fun of I-502. Said, I can't grow my own, 5 nanograms gets me busted, 0, something I can't remember, and then got to be 21. I use the 2 for 21, all this stuff. So I was all ready to attack it, ready to go. And furthermore, my activist friends that I have to see every year when I go to Seattle Hemp Fest, people who I respect and admire and look to for advice and analysis, a lot of them were also against I-502 and very for the Sensible Washington plan, personally invested in it. So I had everything to gain in being no I-502 as far as being radical and being, a firebrand and supporting my friends who were pushing the really good legalization initiative. But as time went on, it became clear to me that the Sensible Washington initiative was not going to raise any money. It was not going to make the ballot. And it's therefore not going to do a damn thing for me. It wasn't going to legalize marijuana for me. It wasn't going to help at all. So then I was forced to start looking at the I-502 and thinking, well, all right, well, no home grow sucks, but you can't home grow now. And a 5 nanogram per se DUID is bullshit, but I smoke and drive now and I haven't gotten caught doing it, so my risk really isn't going up any. The consequences are, the risk isn't increasing. And it would legalize marijuana. And that's no small thing. Legalizing marijuana, ending arrests, and in the context of there not being any legalization states, the symbolic victory of putting the flag in the beachhead and saying, we've legalized, was huge. And not just because I live close to Washington, but at the same time in 2012, there was Washington, Oregon, and Colorado all voting on it. I knew Oregon was going to lose. It didn't have a shot. So it was up to Colorado and Washington. And if only Colorado had passed and left Colorado sitting all by itself in the middle of the country as the hippy-dippy Rocky Mountain High kind of a fluke thing, it was going to take longer to get Washington and Oregon legalized because with a loss in both Washington and Oregon in 2012, neither of them would have went forward in 2014. And then they'd be waiting on 2016. And without Washington and Oregon legalized in 2016, does California make the momentum to get there by now? Or the other 4 states? Probably not. So it was hard for me because I was emotionally invested in being no on I-502. And I had principles and purity to maintain. You know how many articles I've written on the bullshit of per se DUID? How many times I've called out the junk science of per se DUIDs for marijuana? And so I'm going to have to endorse something that runs counter to my publicly stated positions. I'm going to have to endorse an evil of a per se DUID and make myself look like a fucking hypocrite on all of the DUID stuff I'd written. Same for the home grow. I'd established a very strong personal position for years that home grow is the only way we can maintain our power over the tyrannical government or the corrupted 1%, the oligarchs, the corporations that would then have control of marijuana, and we wouldn't be able to grow our own. I had set that position up too for a very long time. And so 502 comes up and it's like, okay, so now I'm going to have to go out publicly support this thing that has no home grow in it. How am I going to reconcile that? So I had a lot of pressure on me in 2012, leading up to 2012, as far as whether or not I was going to stand on this thing. And I finally decided that long-term, big picture, the symbolism of the first legal state and the practicality of finally ending prohibition at some level outweighed my purity problems with home grow and 5 nanogram. And so I had to come out and public support this and take a raft of shit for doing so from a lot of people who were my friends. I got friends that I haven't spoken to now in 5-6 years in Washington State over this. I lost friends. I lost standing. There are events I can't speak at in the Pacific Northwest because the people that run them are still pissed off at my support of I-502. I barely got my speaking spots for Seattle Hemp Fest in the past 4 years because of that stand on I-502. So I understand being emotionally connected to a better future of seeing true legalization and wishing and wanting and hoping and dreaming that, okay, if we didn't get it this time, maybe we'll get it next time. Maybe we'll move forward. Maybe, in fact, if we defeat I-502, that'll send a shot across the bow to all the corporate legalizers that we won't stand for it. You know, just like the 2015 Ohio thing. We'll show those bastards. How dare you give us a legalization that wasn't perfect enough? We'll show you. And so what did Ohio get? Well, they got a shitty medical marijuana that doesn't even allow smoking. And what did California get when those Prop 19 people said, oh no, this is not true legalization. It's too shitty. It's not up to our pure standards. What did they get? 6 more years of prohibition. So when it comes to what changed my mind, what started moving me on this is when my friend Rachel Kurtz, in one little comment on Facebook, on one of my threads where I was raging Bernie or bust still, where she said, Hillary is the I-502 of candidates and Trump is the prohibition. And Bernie Sanders and Jill Stein and Gary Johnson are sensible Washington. They are Arizonans for mindful regulation. They are the Jack Herer Initiative. They are MCLR. They are Bay State Repeal. In other words, they're not on the fucking ballot and aren't going to be. That's what changed my mind, is I found myself trying to defend an emotional and purity-based position. And I kept finding more and more my arguments had to keep using the if only and the magic bullet and all of that, we'll get them next time and this will happen and then it'll happen, and magical thinking that I find true legalizers throwing at me every election cycle to reject the corporate, corrupt, oligarchic, monopolistic legalization that's being foisted upon us by the leaders who did not listen to the little people and rigged the system. That's all the time we got for today, but stay tuned for Hour 2. Toker Talk Radio is coming up next. Until next time, take care of each other, Tokers.
This is the Russ Belville Show. The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at radicalruss.com.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you buy it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant